Ma dove vai?
They called her the Queen of Alienation, the Goddess of Modern Silence, the woman who taught cinema how to look at the void. But before she was Monica Vitti, she was Maria Luisa Ceciarelli. Born on November 3, 1931, she arrived in a Rome holding its breath under the iron shadow of Benito Mussolini's fascism. This was a city of forced marches, black shirts, and rigid imperial propaganda, an environment where the individual was swallowed by the state, and women were expected to be nothing more than fertile, obedient vessels for the regime's demographic campaigns. The regime demanded monumentality, strength, and stoicism, yet her childhood was defined by a fragile, quiet desperation. Her early years were not a romanticized postcard of golden light, Vespa rides, and carefree Roman holidays, but a grim montage of gray dust, strict rationing, and the terrifying rhythmic wail of air raid sirens that shook the ancient plaster of her family's apartment.
The Ceciarelli household was a pressure cooker of lower middle-class anxieties and rigid Catholic expectations. Her father, Alfredo, was a strict government clerk, a man who lived by the ledger, expected absolute obedience, and viewed any deviation from predictability as an existential threat. He was the human embodiment of the petty bourgeois bureaucrat, terrified of poverty, obsessed with social standing, and deeply suspicious of the fast-changing world outside their windows. Her mother, Adele Vittilia, was the anchor of their domestic respectability, a woman who viewed the world outside their door with intense suspicion and sought to shield her daughter from the corrupting influences of modern life. In this house, compliance was survival. Any flicker of artistic expression, any sudden burst of childhood imagination was treated not as a gift, but as a dangerous moral deviation. It was an environment of emotional containment, where feelings were rationed as strictly as bread, and where young Maria Luisa's natural vivacity was seen as a symptom of a rebellious, unstable soul.
When Allied bombs rained down upon the working-class San Lorenzo district in the blistering summer of 1943, shaking the ancient Roman soil to its core, 11-year-old Maria Luisa crouched in dark, damp cellars beneath the city. On July 19th, over 500 Allied bombers dropped thousands of tons of explosives, obliterating neighborhoods, leaving thousands dead, and permanently shattering the illusion of fascist security. The physical sensation of those subterranean shelters was forever burned into her memory. The smell of wet earth, the suffocating stench of sulfur and leaking gas, the cold stone pressing against her spine, and the desperate, low whispers of terrified strangers huddled in the dark. It was in those shelters, surrounded by the threat of immediate annihilation and the choking dust of collapsing brickwork, that she discovered her first and most vital coping mechanism. To keep her mind from splintering under the weight of terror, she began to perform. In the pitch black, illuminated only by the faint glow of flashlights and the sparks of exploding shells above, she would make up elaborate stories of magical, distant kingdoms where bombs did not exist. She would mimic the peculiar voices, the stuttering gasps, and the nervous physical tics of the people sheltering around her, transforming terror into theater. She would turn the horrific roar of the bombardment into a game, distracting the frightened children around her with fairy tales and silly, exaggerated faces. Laughter became her armor against the falling bombs, a desperate shield forged in the ruins of her childhood. And she realized early on that a mask could protect you from the cruelest realities of the world. The war ended, leaving Italy in physical and economic ruins. But Maria Luisa's personal war within her family was only intensifying. Rome was rebuilding, but her home remained frozen in a provincial past, clinging desperately to the conservative codes of the pre-war era. Her mother, Adele, representing the uncompromising social codes of the Italian petite bourgeoisie, wanted a quiet, domestic daughter who would marry a sensible man, bear children, and vanish into the background of a suburban kitchen. Her brothers emigrated to find work in a shattered, impoverished Europe,
leaving Maria Luisa isolated in a household where her expressive energy, her dramatic outbursts, and her sudden, unpredictable bouts of weeping were treated as psychological defects. Her mother famously warned her, "The dust of the stage will ruin your soul, and no man will ever want you." Yet she possessed an inner fire that defied her domestic prison. At just 14, she joined an amateur theatrical troupe, escaping her home under the guise of late-night schoolwork and evening prayers. Her heart beat frantically against her ribs as she stepped into the crude spotlight of drafty parish theaters, performing for working-class audiences who wanted nothing more than to forget their own hunger and the humiliation of post-war reconstruction. The stage was her sanctuary, the only space where the existential dread of her youth dissolved into light, and where she could finally speak without being silenced. By 1950, the reconstruction of Italy was underway, and Maria Luisa knew she had to break free or be crushed by the domestic expectations of her class. She auditioned for the prestigious National Academy of Dramatic Arts in Rome, the ultimate gatekeeper of Italian theater. The admission panel, steeped in classical traditions and accustomed to melodious, pristine vocal perfection, looked at this tall, lanky girl with her wild, untamed blonde hair, her striking, asymmetrical features, and a voice that sounded like gravel scraping against velvet. They told her she was too unconventional. They told her her voice was too raspy, too damaged, and too masculine, a physical defect caused by nodules on her vocal cords that they believed would prevent her from ever projecting classical verse. They recommended she seek a career in radio, where her physical anomalies would not offend the eye, or perhaps avoid the performing arts entirely, suggesting that a career in teaching or typing would be more suited to her social standing and physical appearance.
Voglio proprio vedere cosa ci diciamo adesso. Avanti, parla. Sandro, io non voglio che vieni con me, non voglio vederti, come te lo devo dire? Perché sei venuto?
But talent of this magnitude cannot be silenced by bureaucratic gatekeepers. Silvio D'Amico, the legendary founder and director of the Academy, saw the raw, modern genius vibrating behind her rough edges. He recognized that her unique voice, far from being a limitation, carried an emotional weight that classical training could never replicate. He overrode the committee and admitted her. For 3 grueling years, she worked tirelessly under the tutelage of masters like Orazio Costa, learning to breathe through her diaphragm to control her signature huskiness, turning her vocal defect into her most hypnotic, expressive instrument. She was a sponge, absorbing Shakespeare, Molière, and Goldoni, proving herself to be a stage force of immense dramatic and comedic range, winning the respect of classmates who had initially written her off as an oddity. Yet, to step fully into the professional world, Maria Luisa Ceciarelli had to die, and Monica Vitti had to be born. On the advice of her mentors, who warned that her birth name was too long, clumsy, and difficult for theater marquees, she embarked on a search for a new identity. She wanted a name that sounded modern, international, and completely detached from the provincial weight of her family's expectations. She took her mother's maiden name, Vittilia, cut it in half to create the sharp, modern Vitti, and paired it with Monica, a name she read in a book of poetry and instantly fell in love with. It sounded unforgettable, sophisticated, and completely disconnected from her past. Armed with her new identity, she took to the theater, earning rave reviews. But the silver screen was calling, and its gates were heavily guarded. The Italian film industry of the mid-1950s did not know what to do with Monica Vitti. This was the golden era of the Italian hourglass, curvaceous, voluptuous, Earth Mother stars like Sophia Loren, Gina Lollobrigida, and Silvana Mangano. These women represented a fertile, comforting post-war ideal of Italian womanhood, celebrated for their maternal warmth and earthy, uncomplicated sensuality. Monica Vitti, with her sharp intelligence, lean frame, intellectual gaze, and melancholic, searching eyes,
was an absolute mismatch for these prevailing standards of Latin beauty. Producers told her she was unphotogenic. They told her her nose was too long, her neck too thin, her mouth too wide, her presence too intellectual and cold for the working-class audiences of cinema. They told her to stay on the stage, where the distance of the gallery could hide her physical irregularities, or to undergo plastic surgery to soften her sharp, unconventional features. They could not have been more wrong. The cultural landscape was shifting, a new decade was dawning, and the era of the modern, anxious, independent woman was about to begin. She was to be its undisputed face.
Mi trova qualcuno che venga a giocare con me?
Io non vado bene.
No, troppo vecchio.
Se gioco con lei certamente ringiovanisco.
Io non voglio ringiovanire.
Perché?
In 1957, the course of cinematic history shifted on its axis in a dark, quiet room. Monica Vitti was working in a dim Roman dubbing studio, lending her unique, smoky voice to the character of Virginia in Michelangelo Antonioni's film, Il Grido. Antonioni, a cerebral, brooding director from Ferrara, was frustrated with the melodramatic conventions of Italian neorealism. He believed that cinema had mastered showing the physical poverty of war, but had failed to capture the spiritual and psychological poverty of the post-war economic boom, the isolation, the vacuum of values, and the emotional desolation of a modern world obsessed with material success.
Sitting in the dark of the mixing booth, he heard that voice, husky, filled with unspoken pain, vibrating with modern anxiety. He watched the back of her neck as she stood before the microphone, her shoulders tense with concentrated energy. He walked up to her, looked into her eyes, and said, "You have a beautiful neck. You could play in my movies." It was the beginning of an artistic, intellectual, and romantic partnership that would redefine the medium of cinema itself. Antonioni saw in Monica Vitti the perfect vessel for his cinematic philosophy, the inability of modern humans to communicate, the profound loneliness of the technological age, and the beautiful, terrifying ache of existence. She became his muse, his lover, his collaborator, and his mirror. Together, they would dismantle the traditional structures of narrative cinema, replacing plots with moods and action with silence.
Their collaboration exploded onto the global stage in 1960 with La Avventura, filmed under grueling, near-impossible conditions on the barren, windswept volcanic islands of the Aeolian archipelago in Sicily. The production was plagued by violent Mediterranean storms, financial ruin, and the volatile, simmering passion between director and actress. The crew went on strike, food supplies ran low, and Monica found herself isolated on jagged, black volcanic rocks, mirroring the existential dread of her character. She played Claudia, a young woman searching for her wealthy friend Anna, who mysteriously vanishes during a yachting trip. As the search continues, the mystery of the disappearance is not solved, but rather forgotten, as Claudia falls into a complicated, guilt-ridden affair with Anna's lover, Sandro. When the film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, the audience reacted with outright fury. Accustomed to neat Hollywood resolutions and clear moral boundaries, the spectators booed, they hissed, they laughed at the unconventional pacing, the long, static silences, and the lack of a traditional ending. Monica fled the theater in tears, devastated by the public rejection, hiding her face in Antonio's coat as the crowd jeered. Antonio was shattered, believing his career was over. But by the next morning, the intellectual tide turned. Roberto Rossellini, Jean-Luc Godard, and a group of international critics signed a historic manifesto declaring L'Avventura a masterpiece of modern cinema that had broken new ground for the medium. It won the Special Jury Prize. Overnight, Monica Vitti became the face of the European avant-garde. Her face, framed by windswept blonde hair,
staring out into the empty, indifferent Mediterranean horizon, became the defining image of 1960s modernism, capturing the existential vertigo of a generation that had lost its spiritual anchor.
The intense, suffocating romance between Monica and Antonioni fueled their work, but it was a gilded cage. They lived in Rome, in neighboring apartments in the upscale Parioli district, connected by a secret spiral staircase designed by a friend. This architectural curiosity allowed them to be together constantly, while maintaining a public facade of independence, but it also symbolized the boundaries of their love. Antonioni's obsession with her was both a blessing and a curse. He captured her beauty like no other director, but he also trapped her in his world of profound, exhausting melancholy, treating her almost as an architectural element, a column or a shadow within his meticulously framed compositions. He controlled her movements, her hair color, and her dramatic choices, demanding that she suppress her natural warmth, vitality, and humor to fit his vision of modern alienation.
In 1961, they followed up with La Notte. Monica played Valentina, a wealthy, cynical industrialist's daughter, navigating a cold, nocturnal Milanese landscape of glass and steel, alongside Marcello Mastroianni and Jeanne Moreau. Her performance was a masterclass in quiet desperation, capturing the boredom, alienation, and spiritual emptiness of the post-war elite. Valentina was a woman who used her intelligence as a shield, hiding her vulnerability behind chessboards and cynical remarks, reflecting Vitti's own growing intellectual sophistication and her struggle to find genuine connection in a world of superficial luxury. Then came L'Eclisse in 1962. Starring opposite the impossibly handsome Alain Delon, Monica played Vittoria, a young woman floating through a fractured, materialistic Rome. The chemistry between Vitti and Delon was electric, yet utterly detached, a romance built on shifting sands, where touch was a substitute for communication. The film ended in one of the most famous, chillingly empty finales in film history, where the lovers failed to meet at their designated corner, and the camera instead documents the cold, mechanical details of a developing city at dusk, suggesting that human relationships had been entirely eclipsed by the objects and architecture surrounding them. The tetralogy of incommunicability concluded in 1964 with Red Desert, Antonioni's first color masterpiece. Monica played Juliana, a neurotic, deeply traumatized young mother trying to survive in a stark, industrialized wasteland of Ravenna, surrounded by gray factories, toxic yellow smog, and cold, humming machinery. Monica's performance was visceral, physical, and agonizingly raw. She embodied a nervous breakdown on screen, her eyes reflecting the artificial, polluted landscape. Antonioni went so far as to paint the grass, the trees, and the streets of the set to match her character's internal, fractured psychology. When Juliana eats a sandwich with hands stained with paint, the audience felt the physical sensation of modern neurosis. Her portrayal won universal acclaim, and the film took home the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival.
È l'ultima volta.
No, Riccardo, non fare così.
Ma cosa devo fare? Avanti, dimmelo tu cosa posso fare, io lo faccio. Te lo prometto. Farò tutto quello che dici per filo e per segno. Trovami qualche cosa da fare per quando tu sarai andata via. Io volevo farti felice.
Quando ci siamo incontrati avevo 20 anni. Io ero felice.
But the toll of playing these tormented, alienated women was heavy. Monica was exhausted, her own psychological health strained by the constant exploration of despair. She was a woman of immense warmth, vitality, and humor, yet the world saw her as a tragic, ghostly intellectual, a cold statue of modern grief. Furthermore, her relationship with Antonioni was fracturing under the weight of his artistic control,
and her desperate desire for freedom. She was tired of suffering on screen, tired of being the canvas for another man's existential dread. She needed to breathe. She needed to laugh. In 1966, Monica Vitti made a radical detour that shocked and dismayed the international film community. She starred in Modesty Blaze, a campy, pop art British spy spoof directed by Joseph Losey. Though the film itself received mixed reviews, it showed a completely different side of Vitti. She wore outrageous outfits, spoke English with a charming accent, engaged in physical comedy, and was unapologetically, vibrantly funny. She had broken out of Antonioni's dark, existential room, and she had no intention of ever going back. She had discovered that laughter was not just a coping mechanism from her childhood, but a powerful tool of liberation. The definitive transformation occurred in 1968. Mario Monicelli, the master of commedia all'italiana, comedy, Italian style, cast her in The Girl with the Pistol. Monica played Assunta Patanè, a Sicilian woman who is dishonored by a local man and travels all the way to London to seek revenge, carrying a pistol in her handbag. To play the role, Vitti cut her signature blonde locks into a dark Sicilian crop, physically shedding her past identity. The film followed Assunta's transformation from a provincial, superstitious victim of honor-killing traditions into a liberated, fashionable, independent London woman who realizes she doesn't need to kill her betrayer because she has found her own life. The film was a colossal box office success and earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Foreign Language Film. More importantly, it shattered the glass ceiling of Italian cinema. Until then, commedia all'italiana was an exclusively male playground, dominated by giants like Alberto Sordi, Marcello Mastroianni, Vittorio Gassman, and Ugo Tognazzi. Women in these comedies were merely love interests, maternal figures, or sexual caricatures designed to react to male foolishness. Monica Vitti changed the rules of the game. She proved that a woman could be stunningly beautiful, intellectually formidable, and hilariously funny all at the same time. She became the sole female lead of the golden age of Italian comedy, accepted by her male peers as an equal in comedic timing and physical commitment. Her personal life was also undergoing a massive, painful, yet necessary shift. The long, intense chapter with Antonioni finally came to an end. It was a lingering death of a relationship, but it cleared the path for her to find her own voice, both as an actress and a woman. She briefly found love and artistic alignment with the brilliant cinematographer Carlo Di Palma, who stepped behind the camera to direct her in several comedies, including Teresa the Thief in 1973. This film, which Vitti co-wrote, showcased her ability to blend tragedy and comedy, portraying a poor, working-class woman surviving the horrors of World War II through sheer wit and petty crime. It was a role that mirrored her own survival during the war, allowing her to exorcise her childhood demons through humor. Throughout the late 1960s and 1970s, Monica dominated the Italian box office, becoming the country's most bankable star. Her collaboration with Alberto Sordi became legendary, representing the ultimate screen pairing of the Italian middle class. In films like Help Me, My Love in 1969 and Polvere di Stelle, Stardust in 1973, their chemistry was comedic dynamite. In Polvere di Stelle, they played a pair of struggling, third-rate theater actors touring the provinces during the war. Vitti's performance was a tour de force of singing, dancing, and physical clowning, and their iconic song, Mondo Vai, became a national anthem of resilient, working-class joy. Monica was a chameleon. She could play a working-class Roman flower seller, a high-society hypocrite, a cabaret singer, or a jealous proletarian lover. In 1970, she starred in Ettore Scola's Drama of Jealousy, alongside Marcello Mastroianni and Giancarlo Giannini. Playing Adelaide, a florist caught in a tragicomic love triangle between a communist bricklayer and a pizza chef, she delivered a performance of breathtaking energy, blending operatic passion with physical farce. That same year, her sensational title role in Nini Tirabusciò, La donna che inventò la mossa, earned her yet another Davide di Donatello Award, the Italian equivalent of the Oscar. She would win 5 of these prestigious awards for Best Actress throughout her career, a testament to her unmatched versatility and the deep adoration of her peers. Even international surrealist master Luis Buñuel could not resist her unique charm, casting her in his satirical masterpiece, The Phantom of Liberty, in 1974. She played a bourgeois mother outraged by the absurdities of polite society. She was no longer just an actress, she was a cultural monument, a national treasure, and a symbol of a modern, liberated, and joyfully complex Italian womanhood that refused to be defined by male expectations. As the 1970s transitioned into the 1980s, the landscape of Italian cinema began to shift dramatically. The grand era of comedy was waning, and the industry was struggling against the rise of commercial television networks, which favored cheap entertainment over cinematic art. Monica Vitti, ever the artist, refused to be left behind or relegated to nostalgic retrospectives on television talk shows. She returned to her roots in the theater, performing in demanding stage plays by Georges Feydeau and Arthur Miller, proving to audiences that her dramatic power had only deepened with age. In 1980, she reunited one last time with Michelangelo Antonioni for The Mystery of Oberwald. It was a daring experiment, filmed on early electronic video, adapting Jean Cocteau's play The Two-Headed Eagle. While the film lacked the cultural impact of their 1960s masterpieces, it was a poignant, emotional closure to one of cinema's most famous partnerships. They had grown, changed, and moved on, but the mutual respect, the shared history, and the artistic understanding remained intact. They had written the history of modern cinema together, and they knew it. But her heart had found a new, stable anchor, away from the spotlight. In 1973, Monica had met Roberto Russo, a young photographer and director. He was 16 years younger than her, a gap that set the Italian gossip rags ablaze with skeptical headlines. But their love defied the cynics and the passage of time. Russo adored her, not just as the legendary icon Monica Vitti, but as Monica, the sensitive, sharp-witted, vulnerable woman who loved cooking Roman pasta, hosting late-night dinners for her close friends, and living life away from the glare of the cameras. He became her rock, her collaborator, her driver, and her fiercest protector. With Russo by her side, Monica took on one of her ultimate professional challenges, directing. In 1990, she made her directorial debut with Secret Scandal, Scandalo Segreto, which she also wrote and starred in. The film, exploring themes of infidelity, privacy, and the male gaze through the lens of a video camera that a woman receives for her birthday, premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. It was a full-circle moment of immense emotional weight. 30 years after being booed at Cannes for L'Avventura, she returned to the Croisette as a celebrated director, receiving warm, standing ovations and winning the Davide di Donatello for Best New Director.
Dimmi la verità, te ne ha parlato?
Chi?
Ugo, dell'incidente.
Sì, sì. Ma non è stato grave, no? Mi ha detto che sei rimasta un po' in clinica per lo shock.
Secret Scandal would be her final feature film. Monica Vitti was preparing to step away from the silver screen, but she was not done telling her story. In 1993, she published her autobiography, Sette Sottane, 7 Skirts, followed by her second book, Il letto è una rosa, The Bed is a Rose, in 1995. The title 7 Skirts referred to her childhood habit of wearing 7 skirts to keep warm, but it also served as a metaphor for the many layers of identity she had worn throughout her life. The books were instant bestsellers, written with the same self-deprecating wit, warmth, and intelligence that characterized her life. She revealed the vulnerability behind her famous gaze, her lifelong battle with stage fright, her fears of abandonment, her triumphs, and her profound, unwavering love for the art of acting.
Her final public appearance was in 2002 at the French premiere of the musical Notre Dame de Paris in Rome. She smiled for the cameras, her signature blonde hair catching the twilight, her laughter echoing one last time in the public sphere. She waved to the photographers and the fans who chanted her name, and then she stepped into a waiting car. And then the silence returned. Shortly after her withdrawal from the public eye, Monica Vitti was diagnosed with a form of Alzheimer's disease. The tragic irony was devastating. The woman who had given voice to the complexities of the human mind, the actress who had memorized thousands of pages of dialogue and brought endless laughter to millions, was slowly, systematically being robbed of her memories, her words, and her past. As the fog of the disease settled in, her life became intensely private, confined to her quiet apartment in Rome's Parioli neighborhood. Roberto Russo shielded her from the world with a devotion that touched the hearts of the entire Italian nation. For nearly 20 years, he cared for her at home, refusing to let her be institutionalized and fiercely guarding her dignity. He kept her safe from paparazzi, ensuring that no camera would ever capture her in her state of decline, ensuring that the world would only ever remember her as she was, vibrant, beautiful, sharp-witted, and full of life. He would play her favorite classical music, read her old reviews, and hold her hand, staying by her side as her world contracted into a single room. The world watched and waited from afar, sending love and tributes to the quiet apartment. Monica Vitti had become a myth while still alive, a living monument to a vanished golden age of cinema. Younger generations of actors and directors looked to her work as a masterclass in performance, studying her ability to convey complex emotions with a single glance or a subtle shift in her voice. She was honored with a career Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival in 1995, a tribute to a body of work that bridged the gap between high art intellectualism and popular comedy. On February 2, 2022, the silence became absolute. Monica Vitti passed away at the age of 90. Italy wept. Rome came to a standstill. Her coffin was laid in state at the Capitoline Hill in the Sala Protomoteca, where thousands of ordinary citizens, artists, and politicians lined up for hours in the cold February air to pay their final respects. Her funeral at the Church of the Artists in Piazza del Popolo was a state event, broadcast live to a grieving nation that felt as though a piece of its own history had died with her. As her coffin emerged from the church, the crowd did not offer a somber silence, but rather a thunderous, minutes-long round of applause, a final standing ovation for the woman who had made them feel so deeply.
Mi sembra di avere gli occhi bagnati. Ma cosa vogliono che faccia con i miei occhi? Cosa devo guardare?
But Monica Vitti did not truly leave. She remains forever captured in the silver halide of the screen, immune to the ravages of time and disease. She is Claudia, looking out over the endless Mediterranean Sea, searching for meaning in the wind. She is Vittoria, standing under the cold Roman street lamps as the sun sets on a modern city. She is Juliana, walking through the toxic yellow fog, searching for a place where she can breathe. She is Assunta, holding a pistol, laughing in the face of outdated traditions. She is the voice that broke through the static, the face that defined an era of modern art, and the laughter that healed a nation in the wake of war. Monica Vitti lived a beautiful, chaotic, epic life. A life of shadow and light, of deep melancholy and explosive, rebellious joy. She conquered the world not by conforming to its standards,
but by forcing the world to look at her, to listen to her unique, gravelly voice, and to love her exactly as she was.
Welcome to European Screen Divas. My name is Sarah. Subscribe to the channel, as this will allow me to create more videos.